to me, he's definitely working with new players. Whether or not some of these players are going to fit the system, guys, is interesting to me, especially when we get up the front end of the pitch, when we start talking about the specific role that Kyogo Furuhashi plays, despite getting 34 goals this season. We'll come to it in a minute, but I'm not entirely sure that Harry Kane would, even if he wanted to stay, is really going to fit the specific role that the number 9 plays in the Ange Postecoglou system. And we're going to get to it in a second. Before we do, right, so we'll just go through the kind of the natural positions of how Postecoglou sets up. I want to give a shout out to a channel whose name is James Lawrence Alcott, a big football channel, not Tottenham specific. And he did a video that I'm ripping or taking a little bit of the information from here. I don't necessarily agree with it. I take a lot of the stuff of what he's saying about how Celtic set up, but I don't necessarily agree with how he thinks that Tottenham will look. So that's why I want to sort of reference him, but also go in my own direction with it. I will put the link to his video into the description afterwards. So Celtic play a bit of a 4-3-3 formation with the wing backs having kind of quite unique roles. And here's where I want to start off straight away by saying, when we talked about Bayern Munich, guys, in a few months ago or a couple of months ago, and the idea of Nagelsmann coming in, we were talking about this idea of him playing more of like a 3-1-5-1 system where the left back for Bayern Munich would come up and join the 5, that the right back would sort of tuck in and be more like a back 3. And then you'd have Kimmich playing in that 6 role that would protect. With Postecoglou, the way that he sets up his system is kind of similar to a degree, although not as extreme. With Taylor at Celtic, he definitely has the liberal freedom to get far more forward than Johnson does. Johnson still can join attacks, but his role really is more to play in that kind of defensive end. If there are situations when the transition happens and they lose the ball, it's really his job to get back and sort of protect Cameron or help Cameron Carter-Vickers and Starfelt out. McGregor we're going to come to in a second, but Taylor can have the freedom to move inside or outside as a left back. He is left-footed, but if you actually look at the heat map for Taylor, he spends a lot of time cutting in to be able to help Jota out with the space down the left side and become more of a 5 up the top. I feel like that kind of situation could suit us next season with Destiny Udogie. I'm not entirely convinced that Pedro Porro will be able to play the role that Johnson plays. But with Taylor having, he's not a bad defender, but he definitely has the more freedom to move up the top end of the pitch. I do feel like there's some ways there that Tottenham and Celtic can kind of step in, or we can step into the way Celtic play without too much transitional problem. The key man for Celtic, though, is this guy, Callum McGregor. When Postecoglou got to Celtic, Callum McGregor was a good player anyway, but in the last 2 years, he has become the linchpin, the cornerstone, and everything goes through him. If you were to look at like the heat map of where he goes, he basically sits in this little block the entire time. But in terms of pinging passes, he absolutely could spread the ball up to Jota or down to Maeda or Abada, down the wing. He's also very, very interested in just popping the ball forward to Hatate and Matt O'Reilly. Do you guys know too much about Callum McGregor's game at all, Jack? Have you spent any time kind of looking into him?
I don't know as much about McGregor. I think you're spot on with how he was probably like one of the mainstays in that Celtic sort of 11. But then like you said, maybe under Postecoglou, he's sort of become an even better player because of the role that he's been given. I was gonna maybe touch. I don't want to ruin your flow, Sean, but I was gonna touch on maybe the fullbacks and just sort of maybe even ask you a question, since I actually, of all the managers we've been linked with, Postecoglou is the one I'm sort of the least informed on. But from what I've heard from, various, videos and, kind of, articles and things, is that, he is supposedly, a big fan of Guardiola. And what you said about sort of the fullback sort of coming in field, I was going to sort of like kind of ask the question where it's like, maybe it's where the fullbacks come in field, because maybe if the wingers are good at being able to be dangerous in those wide areas, they can actually be more effective. Kind of like what you see with Arsenal, right? Where you have sort of Bukayo Saka, Martinelli just sort of hugging the touch lines. And the same thing with like Jack Grealish. They sort of just hug the touch line and then they just sort of wait to receive the ball. And then in those wide areas, they're actually more effective than maybe like an Emerson or somebody would be, you know, in those wide areas. So it could be the case that he is sort of like a fan of just having, you know, the fullbacks who are maybe lesser, you know, talented than the wingers in those wide areas, just sort of helping out in possession and sort of overwhelming, you know, the opposition in midfield and causing, you know, overloads and causing, you know, you to sort of kind of dominate the midfield. We had it with, you know, Man City where it felt like they had 10 people, you know, in the midfield just sort of passing it to each other. And I think that's because of like the fullbacks, like you said, you know, with Taylor and whatnot.
Yeah, 100%. So I think that from what I've looked into it, like Taylor has the more freedom to move forward. I'm not sure if it's out of choice that they just go down the left-hand side or out of force because Johnson just doesn't have that kind of forward momentum, that ability to get forward like Taylor does. Taylor, if you look on the heat map, he does like to cut inside. He is two-footed. Even though he's predominantly left-footed, he can use can work on the inside. Jota is an inside forward who does like to come in the inversion as well. He's right-footed, so he obviously pops in this side through here. Almeida and Abada do exactly the same thing, whichever one of those two your Postecoglou's worked with. These guys aren't going to the baseline. They're not going down the line here. They're always looking to cut in. And so you do have situations where if Jota is going to be trying to join the attack, then Taylor can kind of make that front five. Matt O'Reilly is someone that is given far more room. In this midfield three, you have very specific roles that look entirely different. McGregor just sits back in the quarterback role and is the guy who's responsible for pinging the ball around and obviously can defend as well. Like I say, Postecoglou has developed him into a fantastic player, an all-round player.
Like their Rodri, would you say?
He's like the Rodri, and I think when we come to looking at Tottenham, this is the conversation where I want to get your opinion around. I'm not sure whether a fully fit Bentancur is the natural number 6. He probably is with his ability on the ball, but I'm not entirely sure. In a situation, right, where you've got Matt O'Reilly joining the line as well, and you basically have this 5 going forward. Hatate is someone that I think he's got 12 assists this season or 10 assists and like 6 goals. He is someone that's not given, he's played more in the hole, right? So it's a single pivot here from McGregor, and these guys are playing in the half space with Hatate kind of hanging back, looking for, if the ball does get knocked out, looking to pick up the ball and then maybe pass the ball in, pass the ball back out wide, recycle the ball and then get the momentum moving again. But he sort of sits back a little bit, whereas O'Reilly is given the license to get right up and support Kyogo, support Maeda or Abada or Jota or Taylor in that movement. The problem for me is when this gets when the transition happens and they lose the ball, you really only have 4 players here that are sat back. And if you are getting ran at, do you really want, is Bentancur, this is the question for me, is Bentancur, he's the best on the ball, the best one that can deliver the ball, that can start the moves. If we bring Taylor back and if we bring O'Reilly back a little bit here, he's the one that can start the ball, ping it wherever we want. But when you do lose the ball, and of course you're going to transition and turn over the ball quite a lot, is Bentancur the best guy to have sat back in that 6?
I'm just remembering more when Bentancur started playing for us. He did tend to sit more in front of the defenders, mainly because our defenders were a bit naff. But it was only when defenders stopped being quite so leaky that Bentancur started going up the field a bit. So I think Bentancur could do McGregor's role, because he was very good at nicking the ball and just being calm with it and then distributing it up the pitch. But McGregor's also, I think he's been also a great captain for Celtic, and in that role, I think I think that is a good position for a captain. Whether Bentancur's up to that or not, I don't know. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't.
I feel like Bentancur, when you think about it, like he's an incredible ball carrier, but do you really see him sort of actually, like you said with McGregor, like pinging passes like 30 yards, to spread it wide to like Jota? Maybe not as much. Like he's more just that silky ball carrier, that guy who has that nice little kind of one-touch passing to kind of just keep, sort of a bit of composure. And he's also one of the best pressers, you would say, and probably the whole team, if not the best presser of the ball in the team. So maybe you wouldn't want him sitting back in front of the defense as more of, a protector. You would rather him maybe playing as that sort of number 8 role with Hatate, I guess, where he is sort of being asked to maybe kind of get forward, but also win the ball back when he can and press forward when he can, but, maybe not be the furthest midfielder forward. And I guess even you could look at what Gundogan does, for the likes of Man City, right? He comes back, sort of wins the ball
100%.
back, but then he's also one of the guys that, leads the attacks at the same time. I feel like Basuma, you would think, is more the guy who's probably capable of just sitting deep like that and then being able to just, spread play and just run the midfield. We've seen it like with that 4-4-2 with Mason. I mean, Skip, in my opinion, wasn't really doing a whole lot. I felt like it was just the Basuma show, for the recent games. And I think that
100%.
showed that maybe Basuma could do it on his own. Maybe Højbjerg and him would sort of compete for that role. I think Basuma probably might win out. But wouldn't be bad competition, I think, between those two, honestly, at that sort of deeper role. Because Højbjerg can sort of spray the passes when he does have time on the ball and he is able to turn. I feel like, Sean, I feel like Bentancur, no, just your original thing. I don't think he can play that deepest role. He's going to have to play a bit further forward.
And that's okay with me, because I think if you're looking at the specific roles of these three, Matt O'Reilly is definitely the guy who's asked more so than Hatate to get up and join that kind of that overload up top. And I don't know if with the current squad we're going to look at in a minute, I don't know if you're looking at the main three players that we have, even with a fully fit squad with Basuma, Bentancur and Højbjerg, if you're going to play Basuma here in the Hatate role, Basuma in the McGregor role and Bentancur in that role that you're talking about with the Gundogan, I don't know if Matt O'Reilly and the role that he's asked to play under a Postecoglou system is best represented by the skill set that Pierre-Emile Højbjerg has, even though he's asked to do it a little bit more for Denmark. I'm not entirely sure that he fits that mold. Just one overloading sentiment that I took from this guy James's takeaways is the role of Kyogo. So even though he got 34 goals in the season in all competitions, he said that there's moments, so there's periods of the game where Kyogo can go 10 to 15 minutes without even touching the ball. Right, like he's very much all about kind of pulling players out of position and getting into kind of the half space, finding little pockets where he can then receive the ball and then play players through. And you'd think that because of the fact that he scores so many goals that he's always involved in the play, but he often isn't in terms of actually getting the ball to him in the build-up. He's more in the shoulder, or he's more in the space. And then sometimes when the ball does get whipped in from, Abada or Jota or whatever, he's there to tuck it away with some of the deftest, like typically Japanese technique that he has is absolutely superb to see. But I don't know whether Harry Kane is willing to be the player, play that role where he's drawing people out of position to allow other players to kind of to fill into the space, like the Matt O'Reillys, like the Hatates, or the Hatates. I'm not sure how you say his name properly. I wonder then whether or not maybe you could ask Harry Kane to pull back and play the number 10 role, like where Matt O'Reilly currently plays, and you're better off asking someone like Richarlison, as much as I don't particularly rate the guy, to kind of sit in the 9 role, especially when you look at the way that they set up when they don't have the ball. And so I'm just going to bring a few players for the opposition here and work with like a kind of assume a back four for whoever the opposition would be. And I'm also going to offer one sort of defensive midfielder in that pivot for the opposition team. In this situation, if the ball was with the other team from a goal kick or from them getting the ball back, you would find a situation where Tottenham or Celtic would be absolutely man marking. Let me go there like that, and then this guy will be here. Excuse me. And essentially, the role here is when Tottenham under Postecoglou or Celtic under Postecoglou last season, when the other team have the ball in this situation, it's the super high press, where essentially all of the options for the goalkeeper are completely removed apart from 2. They can either pick the one centre back that's not marked, or because O'Reilly or Kyogo, whichever one it will be marking out of the game the single pivot, they can either go to the one person here, or he can go long into the midfield, and then it comes down to whether or not McGregor or Hatate or whoever wins that ball back. If they do win it back, then Tottenham will recycle the possession high up the field and can go again. If they don't, then that is obviously the problem where you're then facing the consequence of the counter-attack, and it can happen incredibly quickly. And that is where Celtic have obviously conceded most of their goals, have happened in situations where the goalkeeper has gone long or cleared the ball because the press has been so effective, and it hasn't landed at the feet or been won back well by the likes of McGregor or the second number 8. In a world where Celtic haven't decided to go long and they've decided to pass the ball back, then the other option for Tottenham is to literally go man marking, where O'Reilly would come in here and Hattati would then try and pick up the single pivot. And again, it creates an overload. It creates the high press, the high intensity, but it also exposes the opportunity for the goalkeeper to go long. So one of the fears that I have is if you're playing against teams where the goalkeeper has obscene distribution skills, and obviously that is such a key qualifying asset now for a lot of goalkeepers.
Yeah.
And in the Premier League, you're going to have goalkeepers that have that ability to a higher level generally than some of the teams that Postecoglou will have come up against in the Premier League, in the Scottish Premier League. If the goalkeeper can find the ball and get it into the space here, given Tottenham's current squad and the frailties within its defensive line, then maybe we'll be exposed a little bit too frequently. So we have to overcome that. What are your thoughts on that sort of side of things, guys?
We do know Ederson, Paul, right? He can just, ping one like 80 yards, like from like a standing position, like over everybody's head, like if he needs to. And there are other goalkeepers that can, like Sean saying, can just get it launched and like get it directly ping. Even Pickford, can do it, like get it directly pings to somebody from like a very large distance. So, I mean, what do you think? Like Postecoglou, though, the whole time I feel like, Paul, I feel like he's a guy that might not necessarily play the exact same formation if he doesn't feel like it's possible. But he does sort of change his formation from time to time, but he never changes the style of play. So I don't know.
And he also does leave it up to the players on the pitch as well. They had a bit of a scrappy game with Rangers in the League Cup final, where not that they sat back, but they relied more on their defending to contain and win the game. And so I think if you do start seeing long balls, I think the players will sort it out on the pitch. But also the keeper's going to be under a lot of pressure. So sure, they might be able to ping a long one out, but also, one game out of 5, they'll just scuff it, and Richarlison might be there to pounce.
Sean, are you worried about like an Ederson or like a Pickford? Is kind of what you're maybe kind of pointing out, is like he never comes up against guys like that usually in the Scottish League, guys that could just, pick out a 30-yard pass, but they can also pick out like a 70-yard pass if they need to, right?
Yeah, that to me is the concern. Obviously, everyone's leveling up here, right? So you can make the argument that Postecoglou hasn't played at this level, but he's never, like you said at the start, Jack, he hasn't managed players of this higher level as well. So everything's leveling up at the same time. But ultimately, look, the way that he's playing football, the way that he sets his teams up is very reminiscent of the way that Manchester City play. He likes to do the high press, the high intensity stuff. But, if we are going to affect that and impact that press when we don't have the ball very well, the goalkeepers that do have the ability to go long, there's going to be space. If you've got half of your team all pressing on the back line here and giving the goalkeeper no real room to do anything else other than go long, then you've got 2/3 of the pitch that's going to be occupied by just 4 or 5 Tottenham players. So that to me is a concern, and one why I think that the transfer market work that we have to do this summer, if you look at the squad that I put together here, this is obviously just using the current squad. We're going to go through that in a minute and then think about what we need. But, for me, at the moment, right, I mean, I don't even think Romero is best with wonderful pace. But Dyer and or Longley / whoever, Sanchez, whoever you want to put in there with the current squad, none of them have infused any confidence in me.
They're not fast enough. They can't get back quick enough, because a lot of the time they're going to be quite high up the pitch. And to get back in time, not a chance. Romero probably has got the speed, but definitely Dyer and Longley don't. No way.
I think the speed thing is important, Sean, but at the same time, like we also need to make sure that the center back that we bring in can actually track the ball when, actually pinged into the air, because we've seen the likes of Sanchez and Dyer. How many times do we watch them just like watch the ball just go right over their head, almost gives them like a haircut, right? And they don't do anything about it. And even also Sanchez was always blessed with pace, but his reaction time to anything is just 4 seconds, 5 seconds too late. So it just doesn't really matter if he's, you know, has that sort of recovery pace. And I agree with you, right? We need a guy that can actually be able to, be able to recover in case anything, you know, like tracking like a Marcus Rashford, you know, tracking, you know, like a Martinelli, or, you know, guys that, you know, are blessed with, you know, blistering pace, and you need somebody that can keep up with them. But at the same time, it's like Sanchez probably can keep up with most of these guys, but like he can't even track, you know, anything to save his life. So it's that sort of thing too.